Great. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Denise Taylor and I am co-founder and managing director of Wylde Connections, and I'm going to basically run the workshop today. We can have a discussion in a little while about what that will look like, how long it will take, and what we're going to go through. We're expecting this session to last between an hour and a half, and it will depend how it goes in terms of the interactivity and when we do the practical group activity, how long that takes, because very often when we run these types of workshops we end up going into all sorts of deeper discussions, and it can take a life of its own. So a lot will be governed by how we get through that practical activity. I'm going to spend some time talking about the bigger picture of sustainability as well, but we'll go through that in a second. My background as a sustainability professional stems way back. I go way back in the manufacturing sector for probably most of my career. I've been a comms specialist, and my interest in sustainability starts over 3 decades ago when I started looking into wildlife conservation. I do a lot of large carnivore conservation all over the world, and I'm known for my working with large carnivores. That includes wolves and bears, and to a lesser extent lynx. So I've worked with some pretty major projects, and I'm also a board director of the International Wildlife Conservation Network. And all of that work has put a focus for me on, the impacts that we're having on the planet and what we're doing from a biodiversity point of view. But when you start to look at it from wildlife conservation and biodiversity, you can't help but look at that bigger picture. So how are we as humans and the businesses that we run and how we behave in society, how is that impacting on people and planet, so society and the environment? So after a fairly lengthy career in strategic comms, I've brought all that specialism together into sustainability. I did some extra training around sustainability. I'm now an IEMA practitioner, and I'm brought in the strategic comms that I've done, and my PhD is in environmental education, and I've also got a real passion for education in general, transformative learning, and really embedding learning across organisations. So the digital side of that is the biggest opportunity at the moment in helping businesses to really get to grips with some of these larger issues. So a lot of our learning is now online. Some of it's self-directed in terms of this is a self-directed programme that we've now just finished completing, and basically what this does is it distills all of the work we do on a consultancy basis. The consultancy programme is anything from 3 to 6 months. Some clients take longer depending on the complexity of the business, but what we've taken is the key elements of that and distilled it into a self-directed programme. So if you're an SME or you've got somebody within your business, your larger organisation who you want to give that broader awareness of sustainability to, then this is a really cost-effective way of doing it. And then we can do any kind of programme or support around that. It's fairly bespoke. Once we start getting into the business, there's all sorts of support we can give, but I can talk about that a little bit later. I have my team with me today. 2 members of my team. We're quite a growing larger team at the moment, so we have 14 members of staff who are spread all over the country. So we have sustainability consultants, we have design and comms experts, and we also have executive leadership coaches and trainers who help to deliver the sustainability work. But today I've got Charlotte with me, who's my co-director, and she's our co-founder, and she's our ops director. And just in case you didn't notice the family resemblance, she is my daughter as well. And Callum joined us in the early stages. We created Wylde in 2020, just before COVID hit, so that was great. Allowed us to do a lot of development work. But Callum joined us from Aston University, first of all, on placement, and basically stayed with us. So he went back, did his final year in politics and economics and
kind of.
Yes, business. He was at the business school, got a first. and did his training. He's done his PIEMA training, so he's a fully qualified sustainability consultant and practitioner, and now works with all our clients alongside our other consultants, delivering our programs. So that's us in a nutshell. Our core business is helping companies to develop and then implement their strategies. So we have a little bit of overlap with the MTC, who I have a long association with right from the very early days, and we do refer clients into the MTC for that additional support, because we really do a deep dive into the business from manufacturing operations. So we have this referral pattern into the MTC, and they've given quite a bit of support to quite a number of our clients, so it's a nice relationship to have. A little bit of overlap, but generally we do the practical business. We're business people, so we understand business, we understand the challenges, we understand the growth opportunities, so we do it from a very practical point of view, and also helping you to embed that learning. So it's a combination of practice and embedding the learning, and then ensuring that you've got a robust action plan and roadmap. So just a little bit of an agenda for what we're going to cover today. I do want to give some context to this, because although we're talking about contracts and tenders and unlocking those opportunities in the business case, and doing that from a practical point of view, there's very little point in doing that without understanding the broader context of sustainability. So we'll have a little bit of a discussion around that beforehand, and look at some of the risks and opportunities. And I also do want to look at the business case for sustainability, and that's where some of the messages come through when you start to look at the business case and what you can talk about. And if you've got your strategy in place, then you can start to unpack all that really great stuff that drops out of that. We'll have a practical session where we're going to have a look at some of the contracts that are now coming through, and I'll ask a couple of questions around that in a second. Group activity, and then I also want to give you some takeaways and practicals, and we'll have some discussions around that. It is an interactive session. I don't want to stand here and talk at you, so this is your session. It's a practical session, so let's see where the conversations take us, and once we get going, conversations can be very illuminating as well as interesting. First of all, what I'd like to do is just shouting out, what is your understanding of the term sustainability?
So we do a presentation through our company CPD, and we do a similar thing, but it's basically, from our standpoint, is understanding the environmental impacts of the construction industry and our role in reducing that overall.
Yeah.
But it is an environmental link as opposed to although the fact of things lasting longer obviously also has an impact on that as well. Yeah. But yeah, it's more the environmental side.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say for us it's around conserving energy and reducing energy costs.
Energy.
For us it's partnership focused, so we can have from the sustainability from our clients, longevity and partnership, and you can work a lot closely with them and understand their needs better. That will have a knock-on effect on reducing the environmental impact.
So really there's supply chain, supply chain influence. Yeah. What about your social aspects?
As in?
How do you treat your staff? How do you treat your suppliers? Do you have any modern slavery in your supply chains? Have you done your due diligence? What's your social impacts on society? How do you benefit society? I'm just asking the question. It's just because I'm asking about sustainability, because very typically, this isn't unusual in this kind of a group. We focus down on environment, and that's what people think sustainability is. But it's much broader than that. So
we've delved into it ourselves, particularly on the supply chain that's outside of our control. We've looked at factory reports, boots on the ground to make sure to protect against things like child labour, things like that, and the offset schemes that we currently invest in each one of them carries a series of UN sustainability goals associated with them as well, which obviously has impact on locals and further fields, whether it's poverty, whether it's clean water, food, that kind of thing.
Great. Okay. Which brings me nicely on to this particular slide. This was developed by an academic called Bridget Mackenzie, and she's taken it from a simpler model, but she's expanded it out into this more complex model. And basically what we see at the moment is this focus on environment and focus on the net zero, and it's this net zero tunnel vision. And what this is, when you've got that net zero tunnel vision, that's just about being less bad. It's about reducing costs, it's about reducing impacts, it's about reducing consumption, all of those things. It's about being less bad. But when you look at all of the other stuff, basically, you know, we all want a better world. Who in this room doesn't want a better world and a better legacy for our children and our grandchildren? So do you want to be just less bad? You want to make a difference. You want to do something positive. You want to have positive impacts. And I can probably guarantee you, if we look at every one of your businesses, you are already having positive impacts, but you're just not articulating them. Don't know all your businesses very well. We've taken a quick look before we came on this session today, and we've had meetings with Kevin, so I know Technoset a little bit more. But, you know, as human beings, as people in society, we want to do all the good stuff. You know, we want to have a healthy planet. We want to have biodiversity. We want our children and grandchildren to be able to go out into the world and see everything we've seen as, you know, kids growing up. We want society to be better functioning. We want people to have, you know, healthy lives, well-being, you know, good salaries and wages, and, you know, feeding into the communities and stronger communities. That's what we're all about as human beings. We're a social species. That's why it's called society. And so when you start to look at your sustainability and the impacts you're having, and I can't go into all of this today. This is a very, very focused workshop on contracts and tenders. We're looking at all of these different elements which have been taken from the planetary boundaries model, which you showed earlier on. So Liz pulled up the planetary boundaries model. And there are lots of different frameworks as businesses, tools, models, business models, frameworks that you can use to help unpack all of this and really look at where your impacts are. And once you understand where your impacts are, both socially and environmentally, and you know how good governance is operating within your business across all your operations, you know, do you have good governance? Do you have all the policies and processes in place? Then it's much, much easier to do an action plan that you can then take forward and implement those actions. And you're probably doing quite a bit of that. So we need to remove the blinkers, get away from the net zero stuff. Is important. It is really important for us to, you know, reduce our energy consumption and reduce our impacts on the planet, but we need to think beyond that and not just about being less bad. So hopefully today, as we unpack the business case and we start to drill down into some of these factors, you can start to see where you can potentially go away and take some actions. Does that make sense? Is there any questions around that at the moment? We have loads of different slides around this stuff that, you know, I can unpack for you. But I think that graphic explains it in that bigger picture sense quite succinctly. Okay.
So Denise,
yes.
Being less bad, is that not a bad starting point collectively?
Yes, it's a very, very good starting point, and a lot of the clients that come in to us and they want help with carbon calculations, for example, they'll come in and say, can we just start with that and at least get that in place? Then can we go on and do some strategic work with you, and then can we start to implement our actions? And what we always say, there's a slide at the end I'll show you, which is the staircase, and I think I shared that with you when I came to see you. It's a journey, it's not a destination. We face a lot of pressures in business. You know, we've got pressures coming at us from all sides. So we've got to look at what we can do. And yes, there's an urgency to doing this stuff. We face, you know, as a society, as a species, we face multiple crises at the moment. And we're really kind of, you know, we're aware of climate change and climate breakdown and all of those things. But what's not happening is we're looking at that and the impact it's having on us as a business as well. And it's affecting all of us. It's affecting every single business, no matter how big or small you are. Just that one aspect of climate breakdown is affecting us. Biodiversity loss is affecting us. All these things on this planetary boundaries, they're all having impacts, but very few businesses are aware of what those impacts are. So you can do a lot to mitigate those risks and take advantage of the opportunities. But being less bad is a part of it. We ran a value chain mapping workshop at Subcon last week, and if you look at your value chain, we align the sustainable development goals along your value chain map. So it's right from where you get your raw materials from, your inbound logistics, your manufacturing operations, your outbound logistics, and your end of life cycle. And then we look at that with the UN Sustainable Development Goals as a framework. We use it as a framework, and where you can increase your positive impact, so we look at that across your value chain, and where you can decrease your negative impact. So the two go very much hand in glove. You can do both simultaneously, but it is a good starting point to think, how can I be less bad? How can I reduce my impact?
I just want to note that value chain mapping workshop is available online as well, so I can send you all the link to that, just in case you want to have a look and get any value from that. So,
I'm just taking this a little bit further. We're all subject to global mega forces. I don't know whether you've seen this particular slide before. You may have seen something similar. And all of these, and this is just a selection of the global mega forces, but it drills down into what are the impacts on the business, and then what are the risks and what are the opportunities. And climate breakdown I've mentioned as one, top left-hand corner there. What's not shown on this graph, but which is shown in other models, is that there's also interconnections between these. There's interrelationships between all these global mega forces, and I do have another slide in another presentation where I link all those together. So, you know, we've had a pandemic, we've had conflicts and war, and these are all global mega trends. We've got rapid urbanisation, and you can see that just here in and around Warwickshire. You know, there's so much building and development going on, which is, you know, taking up land. So you look at land change use, and these all have impacts. That's increasing urbanisation in a rural county, and that's happening globally. Water scarcity is going to be globally one of our biggest threats. And again, UK is a wet country. You know, we have a lot of rain, and you know, it seems like we've had lots of rain over the winter and it's not stopped. But equally, we've got a pull on all the reservoirs and our water sources, and we know what's happening with the water companies and the pollution of the rivers and the seas, and you know, so that's all going to have an impact, and they're all interrelated, they're all interconnected, and what that leads to is feedback loops then. So it impacts and continues to have effects on a feedback situation. So one thing can happen here, has an impact on here, and then you have a feedback loop and it makes it worse, and that happens across all of these different aspects of global megaforces. Deforestation, we know about. Population growth. Population growth is interesting because in some countries we've got birth decline, the decline in the birth rates, and that's causing some countries to change their policies with regard to their social policies. So whereas China used to have a one-child policy, that's now increased because they've now got a declining birth rate, and we're seeing other countries where that declining birth rate's in place. We won't have a population then that's of working age that will then feed back into the economy. So all of these have impacts on society, on the environment. What it means for business is, and again, just a selection of this, and we can discuss, you know, the impacts that these have had on your business. Resource constraints on production. So we have a situation where the superconductor chips, the microchips, have been affected. You'll know about this. That was a complex mix of the pandemic, climate breakdown, because one of the main manufacturers of computer chips is in Taiwan, TSMC, and they were affected by climate change. They had to ship water into the factory, which stopped production because they had a major drought due to climate breakdown. And across the other side of the world, there was another plant in Texas. They had unheard of, really freezing cold temperatures, which also stopped production. So we had this situation during the global pandemic where everybody was like at home and going gaming, drawn the chips that was needed for gaming, plus the production, the halt in production. And that was affecting things like getting hold of electric vehicles and getting hold of, manufacturing machines to operate manufacturing plants and factories. And so that had a big knock-on effect, and that's still carrying on. So, and then what happened with that is then you've got countries who are like the USA and like the UK who are now trying to set up microchip superconductor chip plants to counteract that, because that's all based in one particular part of the world. I think that you might know this figure better than me, but TSMC are responsible for something like 80 or 90% of the production of superconductor chips, aren't they?
I think it's 90.
It's
Yeah.
In Taiwan as a country, it's basically 90%.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the UK does produce some of the components that go on the board that are then shipped over there for assembly and then shipped back. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's part of the reason for it. But then on top of the climate, one of the facilities burnt to the ground as well. So it's still a major issue. It took us 18 months to get a machine in because they were missing one chip. And that's one machine for one thing for a demonstrator purpose. Scale that up for electric vehicles, anything that has a computer in it is still struggling, and that people are buying or pre-order, effectively capping the market in that front, and it is having a knock-on effect on the price. The price is now sky high, and you're trying to buy batch runs of this product because you just cannot get your hands on it. And people were using it to trade between companies and buying other people's stock off them at a significantly higher price because they just needed something. And we're going to experience far more of that moving forwards.
Yeah, there's no easy solutions at the moment, is there? New regulations and governance, we're going to touch on some of that today because we're seeing increasing legislation, particularly around ESG and environment, social governance, and around environmental regulations. And some of those that are coming in are also going to affect SMEs at the moment. Corporates are the ones that are having to do the mandatory reporting, but we're seeing that now coming down the chain. And that supply chain down to smaller businesses. But even when legislation doesn't affect the smaller companies directly at the moment, in that you're not required to report from a mandatory point of view, what we're seeing is the pressure from the supply chains, because the OEMs and the tier ones have to report. They're putting that pressure on the SMEs and saying, right, we want the data from you because we have to report, and we have to then get those, what you call the scope 3s from an emissions point of view, but they're also looking across their own supply chain due diligence, which is what we're going to talk about today. So, have you done your supply chain due diligence? Because they're going to be asking you to do that. And similarly with your own supply chains, have you got supply chain codes of conduct in place to ensure that you've got no modern slavery in your supply chains, that your raw materials and components and parts are sourced sustainably. So, furniture production, you've got certifications that you have to have in place for, raw materials for furniture and construction, etc., etc. So we'll talk about some of that today. That's all leads into you mitigating the risks from the global mega forces. We're seeing a shifting economic power base at the moment. You look at any of the media and drill down into it, you can see those power bases shifting. China buying up lots of infrastructure in various countries throughout the world, and other countries vying for that soft power and that hard power. So that's going to have impacts on us. We need to mitigate those risks. So have you looked at those in your business? Have you done that, that deep dive into what those risks are? Material supply and availability, we've just spoken about chips, but if you're looking to become sustainable and you're looking at alternative raw materials with low impact, for example, what does that mean? Is there availability of that, and what does it mean for your business? Are there any materials within your operations that are going to become scarce, for example? So do you know that, and are you mitigating against that? Market disruptions we've seen from the pandemic, cost of living crisis, all the global mega forces going on. We're seeing lots of market disruption, and even something as simple as a container ship getting blocked in a canal can disrupt a supply chain and have this major effect. So all of these things that are outside our control can affect our businesses. Cyber security is another one. London hospitals at the moment are having to cancel operations because they've been hacked, and that we're seeing an increase in that as well. So how can you protect yourself against that? That's the doom and gloom, and I have to say that when you're starting to look at net zero and you start to look at sustainability, there is a lot of doom and gloom, and there is a lot of pressure, and I think that's kind of there to help us to get a sense of urgency to act. But on the other side of that coin, we're in business, and there's also opportunities as well. So how can we maximise these opportunities from a business point of view? How can we innovate? How can we look at new products? And you spoke about product design. So we've got a client who's an outdoor furniture manufacturer, and they make furniture from recycled plastics. So it's 100% recycled plastics. They're now looking at alternative materials so that they can lightweight their products. So if you make a bench or a table out of recycled plastics, they're heavy. They are heavy. And so how can you reduce that to lightweight it? So you're reducing the impact on the emissions from transport, but also you're reducing the use of materials. And they're working with, I think it might be a HMM, a high value manufacturing centre there in Derbyshire. So I think they're working up that way. They're certainly working with some of the universities to provide hollow, what they call forms. So their furniture is made out of forms, which is essentially a plank, but the legs can be hollowed out, and they're just exploring that at the moment. So there's lots of innovations, and if you're doing the tour later on, you'll see lots of innovations going on around the factory tour here at the MTC. The obvious ones are cost reductions and increased productivity. So if you're doing sustainability, what it means you're doing is having a look at your business. You're doing a business review from a sustainability perspective, but essentially it's just you're just looking at your operations strategically and going through everything that you do and looking at what's going on, where can you reduce impacts, where can you increase profitability, where can you increase efficiencies, and that's just good governance. It's just good business sense, so why wouldn't you do it? So there's a lot of confusion around sustainability, but it's just good governance. It's about being ethical and responsible and about being transparent. Essentially, that's what it is. That's what sustainability is all about. There's more and more focus now on access to finance and investment. There are lots of grants available. There's lots of support available. The banks like Lloyds Bank, as well as providing proactive support in terms of guidance and advice, are also putting money where their mouth is and providing that access to finance from capital investments and loans and grants and whatever. So, and investment houses are starting to look more at green businesses. Are those businesses green? Because they've now also got to do their due diligence. And completely unrelated to manufacturing, but we were talking about the Download Festival earlier today, because Callum lives in Macclesfield and has to get back up towards Macclesfield, and Download starts today, and we're seeing some of the headline acts pulling out of that festival because Barclays Bank is supporting that festival, and it's been brought to the attention that there's some investment in some, you know, oil and gas, and I think it's supporting the conflicts, isn't it? The global conflicts that are going on. But that's very real, whether you agree with it or not. That's happening. So, you know, you're starting to see financial institutions feeling that pressure themselves. Bailey Gifford was another one that had to pull out of the Hay Literary Festival, I think a couple of weeks ago. So, you know, these are the pressures that the investment houses and financial institutions are feeling. New technological breakthroughs, you'll see some of that today, and automation, you'll talk about some of that today on the tour as well. And we'll discuss some more of the opportunities, but there's very much a strong business case for being sustainable, for being ethical and responsible, and then translating that into how do we get that into our supply chains and how do we have those conversations. And you're not the only one that's feeling that in terms of communicating how you go about influencing your customers to accept sometimes those higher prices. And we've got a client in London who have about 600 staff, their facilities management, and they work with the high-end fashion houses and getting them to accept some higher rates because they have to pay more than the living wage was a real struggle 2 or 3 years ago. But now that, you know, there's more emphasis on sustainability and particularly those social aspects, we're starting to see that shift, and their percentages on getting the living wage across and their higher prices are starting to really take shape now, and they're gaining some traction on that, and they've got some impressive statistics on it. These are some of the steps you can take. I'm not going to go through these because I want to press on. You will get that. We can come back to it a little bit later on. But, you know, you can mitigate the risks. This is all about having a look at your business and looking at what actions you need to take. So really drilling down into the business. One of the key areas that we always focus on, we have a very, very strong leadership component in our programmes. And we have to have the buy-in of the senior leadership teams because that's where it all starts from. And if you've got the buy-in from the senior leadership teams, and we've demonstrated this time and time again, everything else just falls into place. And those leaders need to really understand that bigger picture, but they also need to be able to take bold and courageous decisions. And some of those decisions, you know, will take time to have positive impacts, but in the longer run it will lead to resilience and business growth. But it's understanding how that would work. And the business case for sustainability, we've pulled together this graphic, and you will get this. I could do a whole day on unpacking every single one of these and what it means to your business, and certainly when we go through the programme we drill into all of these different areas. So when you say it's all about being less bad, these are also the opportunities. You know, you're probably doing a lot of this, and you know, if you've got, you know, on the social side, if you do, how many of you do charitable work as part of your business? Do you support charities? Do you support community events? All of those kind of things. A lot of businesses do. I'm not saying everyone should, but you know, there's a lot of businesses already doing this stuff. What have you got in place that supports your staff and employees? What systems, processes, initiatives do you have in place from a social point of view? That then leads to enhanced reputation because people want to work for businesses that treat them better, and then that leads to loyalty and staying longer, so you don't have those recruitment costs every 2 minutes because you've got a churn of staff. So all of these things have an impact on your business. They have an impact on the bottom line, and you get some of these things right, and it's all, you can say this is all about everything you do in business is about sustainability when you look at it. Get it all right, and you have resilience, and you have, you know, you're underpinning your strategy for growth. I'm just thinking now, so if we move forward into some of the practical work, do you have any questions so far in that bigger picture? It is just a very, very brief tour. I could go into planetary boundaries, and I could go further into global mega trends and some of those aspects. So are we all okay with that? Happy to answer any questions. And as we go along as well. So we're getting down into what we're all here to do today, and that's to talk about unlocking contract opportunities. And essentially what that means is looking at that procurement process. And that's whether you're looking at the procurement process from the perspective of your customers putting pressure on you, but also looking at the procurement process from how you can then have your suppliers coming along with you on that sustainability journey. So it works both ways, upstream and downstream. And what does sustainable procurement actually mean? And there is a shift towards being having this sustainable procurement in place. There's a lot of attention and emphasis going on, and what we're looking at the moment is what are those drivers? What are the drivers for this sustainable procurement? Comes down from those global mega forces that we've discussed, so it's all linked into the global mega forces. So it's all about mitigating those global risks that impact on our business. The biggest one for most businesses is this compliance with increasing legislation. And most businesses aren't aware of a lot of the legislation that's coming down the line. Things like TCFD and TNFD. I don't know whether you've heard of those at all. So TCFD is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. TNFD is the Task Force for nature-related financial disclosure. So you're going to have to be aware of all. That's just two pieces of legislation that will affect all businesses. Might not come into play until 2026, but you need to start getting ready for it pretty much now. It's like with your carbon calculations and your GHG emissions baselines. You need to be doing the preparatory work before you have to start reporting. So be aware of those. There is, I'll show a QR code at the end, and there's an ebook on sustainability reporting and what you need to know. So you can download that later on, or we can send it to you. Meeting changing market and consumer demands and achieving operational efficiencies. We all want to have a better profit margin, we want to have a better bottom line, and that's achieved through operational efficiencies. So how can you use all of this to sustainable procurement to achieve those operational efficiencies? We've got a client in the construction industry. They're about £90 million turnover. They've gone through the whole programme with us. They've done it in a very robust way. We've been working with them for 2 years. Part of their implementation was to do supply chain due diligence. They've now realised a saving of at least £2 to £3 million a year by just doing their supply chain due diligence. And that's on efficiencies and what's in their supply chain. They're in construction, so their supplier list is huge. There's hundreds on their supplier list. But the savings they've made is just phenomenal. And that's just one action, and it wasn't that costly for them to do that. And the savings are just a real bonus and benefit and opportunity. Also, it helps to attract investments as well. What I want you to be doing today is looking beyond just doing the tick boxes on tenders and contracts. So if you get an RFQ in or a tender and a contract, and it's saying, okay, you need to demonstrate your sustainability credentials, you need to demonstrate your environmental credentials, what can you do beyond that to differentiate your business so that you're on those preferred supplier lists and you're visible? These are some of the key drivers as well. So there's widespread use now, and this is some of the research behind all of this. You'll get these slides. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I wanted it to be there so you can look at it in your own time. But there's increasing and widespread use of reporting standards. So that's happening globally, but that's now feeding back into businesses here in the UK. So whether you have a global reach or not, and I would imagine that you're starting to see some of this coming into play in terms of reporting standards. Corporate ESG commitments and financial performance. So C-suites and leaders in those corporate organisations are feeling the pressures, and they're going to press that down onto the SMEs. And then government mandates on sustainability. All governments are looking at sustainability from a countrywide point of view, and that's now shaping policy in terms of supply chains as well. So example, Singapore, looking at sustainability credentials of companies bidding for public sector projects. And we're seeing that in public sector projects as well. Have you been feeling that pressure yet? Have you been asked for any of this information in your contracts?
We work with some of the biggest construction companies in the country, so on quite a few projects now, there are regular reports we have to fill out on a monthly basis for them. For the sustainability reporting themselves, so they're definitely feeling the pressure.
You're definitely feeling the pressure. And you mentioned, was it you who mentioned EcoVadis earlier on? Somebody mentioned EcoVadis earlier on. I'm having one of those days today. Was that yourself? Yeah. We're finding in the construction sector with several of our clients that they're being asked to go for EcoVadis, which is a sustainability benchmarking accreditation body. So if you've heard of B Corp, EcoVadis is another one. There's another one called Achilles, which is something that some construction companies are asking for, and that's only it's going to increase. It's not going to diminish. And EcoVadis, if you haven't got your strategies in place, you can score very lowly on that, and that can then affect whether or not you get the contracts. It's very real. It's a real business case, isn't it? So whether you're on the list or not. So that's kind of what we want to try and mitigate today is what do you need to be able to do to satisfy those sustainability credentials. We're seeing this as well more and more in public tenders if you're going for public contracts. And then just looking at the changing contract requirements. Again, compliance with ESG regulations, mandatory sustainability reporting. We're also seeing economic incentives and penalties. So we've got several clients in that construction sector. Again, construction's kind of way ahead of manufacturing at the moment. So when we talk to some manufacturing clients, they say to us, we're not feeling the pressure yet, so we don't care, we're not bothered. Some of them do. So if you're in the JLR supply chain, for example, or any of the big ones where they're paying attention to it, you might be feeling the pressures. But the construction industry is completely different, and the developers are really pushing down on this stuff, and they're enforcing penalties, and our clients are having to pay money into those customers for things like offsetting and have stuff sat there for their offsetting for their carbon reductions, which is just crazy. And they're introducing penalties if they don't reach certain reductions on certain projects, which is just, and it's costing them. It's costing these companies money. In real terms, or they're not on that supplier list, which means losing potentially, if you've got all your eggs in one basket, which one of our clients has 80% of their business with one developer, if they lose that developer as a customer, that's their business basically gone. Enhanced efficiencies and cost savings we've spoken about. Brand reputation will start to come more to the fore. There's lots of examples out there of businesses doing it badly and being castigated in the media for it. So you then enter into risk management. This is where your communications aspects comes in. So what you want to be doing is all the good governance stuff so that you can talk about it, so that you then can prove your sustainability credentials. You've got that backed up with a robust plan. You know what you've done. You've got the transparency and visibility on it, and the integrity. So you can't be accused of any greenwashing if you've got all those things in place and all the steps right. So when you start to communicate, you can do it with confidence and you can really shout about it. The furniture manufacturer we spoke about earlier, they've just got the King's Award because they can really, really shout about what they're doing. And although they produce a sustainable product, all the other stuff still comes into play. So they've still got to do the social aspects of it, and they've still got to have good governance. You don't get the King's Award very easily. Increasing legislation. We've got a lot of legislation coming in. This is just a selection of some of the legislation you may or may not have heard of. I would imagine you guys will have heard of some of this stuff, given what you're doing in construction. So the SECR is one of the ones. I don't know how big your business is.
Not very.
Not very, yeah. So you're probably not there in terms of mandatory reporting. We've got a client who's just tipped over into having to report on the SECR, and it was a mad scramble last year for us to do that. So they're now having to report on that and in their annual reporting. And we've got things like the plastic packaging tax, which again you can start to look at how you can mitigate against that and reduce costs and impacts. And then if you're operating in Europe, there's all sorts of European legislation at the moment that you need to be aware of. But we've done the sustainability reporting ebook covers all of these, so you can take a look at that. And also after this workshop, and take these slides away and just go and drill down into some of these and what impacts they might be having on you. Do you have ISO 14001? Not yet, do you? No.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we'll
It's all
work
part
on it.
Yeah, because that has a legal register and helps to take care of some of this compliance stuff when you start to look at that. So having environmental management systems, whether it's an ISO 14001 or not, can help to mitigate against the risks of non-compliance.
I would just add on that European side, the European equivalent of the streamlined energy and carbon reporting came into force in April for all SMEs
Yeah.
who supply into anybody in Europe, even if they're coming from the UK. It's definitely one to investigate as a very
Yeah.
early. Now, you might find this year's report needs to contain it as well, or you maybe ask for
That's
it.
CBAM.
Not CBAM.
No.
No, that's a different.
Oh, there's just so much, honestly.
CBAM is in its trial phase, only because I looked it up yesterday, and that's going to be more coming into force in 26 because they haven't fully defined all of the ins and outs of it, but they are trialling it right now.
Yeah.
And that will affect the UK as well. And the UK is going to have an equivalent when they figure out what that will look like and how close to the EU one it will be.
Yeah, because I understand if they're not equally aligned, then you could create a trade war between the UK and Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Callum understands the legislation side of it, but I'm the strategy side and doing all of this. Like the consultants kind of drill down into the detail of all this. But
There's
yeah.
some stuff as well coming over along about certain claims that you can make without being able to back them up. So being able to claim that you're like a carbon neutral company, you won't be able to make that claim anymore without actually being able to back it up, because climate neutrality and net zero are completely two different things. You can't be a net zero company with using carbon offsetting schemes and other things. You have to make actual reductions in emissions to be able to claim it. So there's going to be things like that to avoid such wide spread claims.
Is this part of the legislation that comes into force into 2026, which
Yeah.
will actually penalise
Yeah.
companies against greenwashing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's lots
Yeah.
of guidance coming out there from a manufacturing perspective on avoiding greenwashing. So
Yeah.
another one which came out last night, I cannot remember which company it was, but it looked pretty comprehensive as a starting pack of
Yeah.
his things to not say.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to keep on top of all this, because within that mix as well, how the increasing legislation is administered and governed is also changing. So the TCFD is now under a different umbrella than when it first started, and they're shifting things about in terms of the bodies that you report to, like the GRI. So that's also moving and shifting, and trying to keep on top of it, even when you're in the sustainability sector, as we are, it's just a minefield trying to capture all of this. And we did the ebook last year, and it's probably actually out of date now, and we're working on updating it. It's fine for you guys today just to get a real sense of it, but we're having to continually review it and update it like every quarter at the moment, and it's just a minefield. It really is a minefield. But these are all the things you need to be aware of when you're looking at your due diligence and your sustainable procurement as well, because they will ask you whether you are compliant. So compliance is one of the biggest issues when you're looking at tenders and contracts. Okay, we're quite a small group today, so what I'd like to do is just we've got some practical activities to do, and we've got a couple of documents that I'd just like us to take a look at. So what we've given you is just a couple of examples of procurement policies, if you like. We've got loads of examples of contracts and tenders across different industries. They pretty much, from a sustainability point of view, ESG point of view, ask similar questions to get the information from you. Now, some are more detailed than others. So what you've got on the blue sheet is one that's fairly straightforward. And then the other one we've put together from the PAS 7, is it 7,000? Callum?
Pardon?
PAS 7,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a publicly accessible service standard that's available to you called PAS 7000. You can go in and access that, and some of those questions on the grayscale document have come from them as well as other areas. So basically what I want us to do is just take a practical look at these and look at what are the contract requirements in relation to ESG. Now, what you'll find in tenders and contracts, some contracts will put the sustainability elements up front and centre. Some of them will weave it throughout the document, like these ones here. You've got it woven through. And as we discussed earlier when we were looking at what sustainability actually is, what does it mean? If it's woven through, are you picking up on some of those things that actually relate to ESG, environment, social and governance? When you look at the environmental aspects, they're straightforward. You know, have you got a waste management policy? Have you got ISO 14001? Have you got this, that and the other? But when you're looking at the social aspects and you're trying to differentiate yourself, how can you do that? How can you achieve those credentials? How can you prove those credentials? So just want you to take a look at it together, and a couple of questions up there, and then I've got a couple of more questions in the next slide where we can have just open up the discussion. So we just have 5 or 10 minutes just discussing it from your business perspective. I want to see where this is coming from in terms of what you're being asked and what you're picking up from these two documents, and where you're currently at.
And this is a typical.
Yeah, so that's an amalgamation of different ones. So we've got like all the questions that might potentially be asked.
Right, okay.
And then the one in blue is one that's come from a client who's asked us to look at that for them last week.
And it's from private sector. You don't really lose them in the contract. But in the private sector, they're asking this there's like, I mean, I'm just looking at the other stuff.
You are.
I just want to, there's some practical actions you can take, and you're kind of on this journey anyway, and I know you're starting on yours at the moment, but the real key to this when you're doing the ESG stuff is just thoroughly understanding your business, doing a full strategic business review, and then establishing that very, very clear vision for embedding sustainable business practices. And what that means is when you do the business review and you look at your gap analysis and you produce the robust action plan, that gives you that clear direction and focus, because you know exactly what you're doing. And when we do, and I haven't got time to go through one with you today, but when we do a detailed action plan, we cover all those areas. We cover environment, we cover social, we cover governance, we cover leadership, we cover all those different, your operations. And so you'll have goals and targets in each of those areas, and that will be short, medium and long-term goals, because it's a journey, it's not a destination. So where are your quick wins? And when you come back to looking at ESG, what are you already doing on social? For example, they're your quick wins because you're probably already doing it as good governance. So you've got some quick wins already. What are you doing on your environmental stuff and your policies and processes and procedures? So you'll have environmental management systems of some description, even if it's not the formal ISO 14001. You're still going to have quality standards in place, you're still going to have policies in place, you're still going to have procedures in place that you can then bring into your sustainability strategy and start to map out your actions and your roadmap. And then it's about engaging with your stakeholders to implement that. What part you mentioned partners and collaborators earlier. There's lots of support out there. So when you do your stakeholder mapping, which is part of that business review, who are those partners and collaborators you can work with? Some will cost, some won't. You go to Lloyds Bank, if you're a customer of Lloyds Bank, which I think most of you are in this room, there's a load of support you can access there that's going to really support the business. You've got, the chambers of commerce, you've got the manufacturing organisations, you've got the likes of MTC, you've got Aston University who do servitisation support. There's lots out there that you can access in terms of stakeholders. So when you do your stakeholder mapping, don't just think about customers, suppliers and employees. Your stakeholders are much, much broader than that. And where does the planet sit in all of that as well? So where is Earth as a stakeholder? What are we doing towards that? And the key to all of this is regularly reviewing and your progress and your achievements. So, if you've got this in place and you're communicating, how can you differentiate yourself? How can you go out and win awards? How are you communicating all of this good stuff to your stakeholders so that you can win new business? And how can you then bring that back to your procurement, being a sustainable procurement policy in place and translating that up and down your supply chains? Because, there's a lot you can do for very, very minimal cost and investment when you start to drill down into it. So it's not difficult to do some of this review, the strategic review, and putting your action plans in place if you just devote some time and energy to it. Obviously we can support at Wylde and there is a cost to that, but even if you do stuff yourself, you can achieve quite a lot and do it from that broader perspective and not just about being less bad and that net zero tunnel vision. Really look at where your business is going, where are we taking it, what's the vision, and how can we have a better impact on society and benefit to society and the environment. With a starting point, and you'll get this so you can have a look at it properly, is where are you on the sustainability staircase in terms of your journey. So it's a journey, not a destination. And most businesses, when they come to us, hopefully are not in the purple zone, which is non-compliant, but given the increasing legislation, you need to keep on top of that. They're somewhere here, usually. They're compliant, they're going beyond compliance, they're starting to think about circular economy, they're starting to put processes in place, they might have done their carbon calculations, starting to think about, what else do we need to do to have positive impact, and then you're starting to move up the staircase where you're really embedding circular economy principles, are constructing client has just started a manufacturing arm, and because they've been through this whole process, they've got circular economy in right from the beginning before they've even had anything running through that factory. So they've now got local suppliers, they've really drilled down into it, they're using recycling the offcuts from the panels they're making, really embedded circular economy practices, doing things like life cycle assessments, and I think you two have both touched on that in some way. So you're looking at environmental product descriptions and things, EPDs and life cycle assessments. So there's some of the other things you can do. Cost to that, but it's worth doing. Working with a couple of companies in the rail sector now that are looking at EPDs, and one in the electrical installation side of things where they're starting to look at EPDs. And again, differentiates you from others because you've got good governance and good processes in place. Not every business can get up to here depending on where you are and what sector you're in terms of your impacts. But most businesses, if they do this well, can get somewhere between the orange and the green, because you'll take some of these practices and some of these practices, and you're kind of somewhere in the middle of that. If you're producing a sustainable product like the furniture manufacturer, then they're definitely up here, and they've gone all whole hog on it anyway and just won the King's Award for Sustainable Development. So they're really up in that space. They live and breathe sustainability and always have done for 30 years. So they started out in that, they just didn't articulate their strategy and hadn't pushed out to their stakeholders. So when you get the slides, just have a look at that and discuss it with your teams as to where you think you are and what other actions you can take, and bring that back into your procurement, your sustainable procurement processes, because some of that will inform your sustainable procurement as well, all interlinked. And you'll be pleased to hear that I'm kind of now done and we can go on a tour. I'm going to do a little bit of a sales pitch in that we can help. We do help develop strategies, and we help to implement them. We work with a number of partners as well in terms of supply chain. We do have a sustainability, that's self-directed, the masterclass. But if you are a certain size of SME or even a bigger business and you want to put a strategy in place and you want the hand-holding and all the wonderful stuff that goes around it, then you can draft us in person. We do a very comprehensive programme. Takes anything from 2 months up to 6 months, depending on the complexity in the business and your time resource. But and then we can do any other aspects of the services around that. We have a 5-step model, which is assess, develop, implement, engage and transform. So there's a lot of education in there. We really work with your teams to educate them about sustainability, and we do all the practical stuff. We want to help you grow, basically. We want to help businesses to grow and develop and have this as, sustainability embedded throughout to support and underpin that growth. So that's who we are. You should, if you scan that QR code, it will give you all our contact details. And I'm happy just to have, an informal conversation with you and just talk it through. So if you did need support, whether or not you use Wylde, I'm still happy to have that conversation with you. Free, no obligation discovery call. Our goal is to help as many businesses as possible to do better, to have more positive impacts and not just be less bad. That's where we want to be. And in talking to lots of businesses, then we'll get businesses who will work with us, but at least along the way we'll have given you some food for thought in helping you to become better as well. So whether or not you work with Wylde, at least we will achieve some of our goals, but it would be lovely to work with you as well. And in conjunction with organisations like the MTC and like Lloyds Bank, we work quite closely with Stuart and also with Catherine and her colleagues. I'm very good at joining dots and putting people together in terms of networks and where they should be, and I'll do that whether or not you work with us. So if there's anybody you want to be connected to, I've worked in manufacturing for a long time, so I'm pretty well immersed in a lot of the networks. So thank you for attending today and for listening to what I have to say. I hope it's been useful in terms of just uncovering some of the conversations and the impacts and the, some of the pressures and challenges that you kind of all face. I'm happy just to have a very quick session on final comments, what you feel. Was it useful today? I'm not going to do a feedback one. I'm not going to give you loads of feedback forms, but if it's been useful today, that's great. Can I have a key takeaway from each of you? Just one takeaway.
Well, I mean, for me, it just goes to show how much we don't know.
You and me both.
More specifically, the legislations, all those bodies that we probably need to go away and start to look at whether they impact us, if they do, how, and what we need to be aware of before we get caught out.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar is very eye-opening. All the legislation on the side of it. I think there's a lot we can take away and implement to keep ahead of the curve.
Yeah, it is about keeping ahead of the curve, because there's a lag at the moment in manufacturing. If you can get ahead of the curve, you'll be the lead on it. So one of the reasons I'm doing these workshops is get it done now, because there's an opportunity here. So, Stuart?
I would say it's awareness for me to promote to my clients that they ought to be looking into this more than most of them are, if I'm honest. Because if I talk to them about it, not many of them are on that journey.
There is a lack of awareness, isn't there?
Spooked into thinking we've got to do something quick. It'd be like you say, it'd be like GDPR or pensions, won't it, where it starts off with big companies, then all of a sudden little companies have got to do it, and there'd be a mad scramble where everyone's just trying to tick boxes instead of actually doing something.
And instead of waiting for that to happen, get ahead of it now, because there's advantages. There's definitely competitive. We've seen it with our clients. I'm not just doing this, saying this as an opinion. We're physically seeing it with our clients. They're definitely getting an increase in contracts and profitability. And as I said earlier, with the construction client, massive savings on costs in their supply chain. And it's just good governance. Sustainability doesn't have to be this big complex. It is, but it doesn't have to be. You can just, it's transparency, it's visibility, it's ethics, it's responsibility, it's good governance. That's what it is, essentially. Sustainability is just about keeping the status quo. When you look at the definition of being sustainable, it's about maintaining the status quo, and we need to be beyond that, and be more positive and regenerative, and wanting a better world. Kevin, what's your key one?
Denise, thank you for your passion and your learning. I think we need to get out there and get the message out there and get more people around the table.
Yeah.
It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is massive. It is massive.
It's a global way of coming towards us.
Yeah. And just look at the good we can do. I mean, we've been around your factory, and I went out the back door of your factory, and there's this whole gorgeous nature reserve, and it's like, just on that one thing alone for TechnoSet is like, oh my God, I can do so much with this as a positive impact, like a real positive impact.
But, I don't want to put it down on it, but just culturally, I think we struggle as a nation. We're miles behind.
We are.
If we think about a lot of initiatives that we've all seen over many years within manufacturing, you think, that's great, but we don't embrace it, we don't get around it. And that's no disrespect, but it's a reflection. There's two manufacturers sitting in the room today, and yet it's a free learning.
Yeah, and we've put this out to a lot. So Stuart put it out. We've got strong networks, and it was ever thus. But we will record this and get it out, so we will reach a bigger audience. But you're right, and it is that it's breaking those traditional mindsets, isn't it? And embracing the possible. What can we do to be more positive? There's lots of positives from this.
You touched upon education. I think that's massive as well. And I think about some of my colleagues back at the factory. I see the Uber Eats and the McDonald's and all this stuff that comes into the factory every single day. And I think culturally, we need to.
We've got a long way to go. Yeah, we've got a long way to go, and it is education. Yeah, Catherine.
Yeah, and that's where we come in, because we are delivering business support. Through all the contracts that we deliver. So yes, this is hugely important to us, because we are out there bidding for contracts. But we've got to make sure that companies are engaging in this. So by us being able to put on similar type workshops. And through the network of companies that we're working with, we can help to get more people in the room.
I think we possibly need to take it in very small steps for a lot of our companies, because like you said, there's so much, it can be overwhelming, and if it's too much they just won't do anything.
Absolutely.
Whereas if we can take it in very small steps, I think people...
Yeah, it's got to be real for manufacturers as well. So today was about contracts, absolutely.
And that's why we all struggle to get people in the room, because people will book onto events, our support is all free. We can guarantee half of them won't turn up. And sometimes that's just because something else has come up.
And it's pressures of work.
It's not because they don't see the value in it, but they physically can't do everything. So how do we bring this up to be a priority?
I think digital has a part to play in that, which is what we're exploring with, the self-directed programs, and we have a sustainability awareness workshop program as well, which is hybrid, so it's online, 5 modules online, and then we do an in-person full-day workshop, and that's aimed at teams, and we drill down into the business operations on that, and that's quite popular actually, so we can maybe talk about that.
And it is this terminology as well. We have the same thing with innovation. Can't get anyone to come along to an innovation workshop
because it's too
something different.
Yeah, I know.
They'll come along. It's because they don't connect with the words that we use in terms of business.
Yes.
You business owners don't connect with, so we need to completely change the terminology to address the same.
Yeah, and come back down to very real things like contract opportunities, value chains, all of those things. That's the language that traditionally manufacturers understand.
Efficiency.
Thank you for that. Efficiencies, all of those things.
Visibility for me.
Yeah.
Because if I hadn't been invited by my relationship manager, Lloyd's, I wouldn't have a clue that this existed. I'll be honest with you. And I was supposed to bring 2 colleagues with me, and they didn't come because of exactly what you said, how it's communicated to the business environment. I mean, they would have benefited from coming here, and I'm going to tell them about it. They need to, be a bit more
open up
a bit more, because of the word manufacturing was in the title of the invitation. It was almost like, well, it doesn't really apply to us, but of course it does. Applies.
Well, it's great to have you here today. Thank you.
It's great to be here.
So thank you, Liz.
Just kind of seeing the same challenges we're seeing in our smaller ecosystem is affecting industries we don't necessarily get to see very often. We might deal with national infrastructure, but not people actually doing the work, and we have an events team, but not necessarily the connection to who's actually doing it from the other side of payment, and seeing that it is, and language is a massive thing. We have the other issue of a lot of our engineers are researchers, and we do that level, so they're going in and talking technical, and it's like, no,
bring it back down.
Bring it back, start again. And we're seeing that even when we talk to SMEs about sustainability, it's picking and choosing the right words. And going, okay, they're not getting that one if we try this set. It's like picking up more, okay, we'll use that set and that conversation. But manufacturing is so far behind.
It's a real issue. Because we talk to so many businesses and they say, well, nobody's pressuring us yet. And it's going to be a massive wake-up call, it really is. And it's coming next year, and we're halfway through this year. They're going to have to start gathering data ready for the changes in legislation.
I was going to say, I think if nothing else, if everybody knows what everybody can offer, use people to help and support you. Because there's great support here at the MTC where they offer a lot of free services. Those that are doing the tour find out a bit more about what goes on there. Because obviously you're the expert in sustainability, so I'm sure there's any stuff there. If there's anything that I can do at the bank, to directly towards people that we either work with or services or support we can provide, just talk to each other, spread the word to other people about what help's available, because there's a lot.
And I think there's funded support as well in different regions, so Catherine can talk more about that depending on where you are based regionally. There's UK SPF funding coming through, which is then driving some of the other funding, and then there's lots of green grant funding as well, and then funding around technologies. It's just navigating that landscape and finding out what fits.
On the apprentice side, if you're finding that you want apprentices to have a bit more of a knowledge, push that back on the course, and they'll feed that back that you're saying you want your apprentices to do a bit more of that, because I don't believe it's currently part of they have to do something like that. they can have an awareness of people dropping in and doing sessions for them, but it's definitely not, you know, a bulk of it. So push it back and go, where can we get this training? How can we make sure they're coming through on that front as well? So this is a training centre, not just for apprentices, but other courses as well. So that push that back and say, what courses do you have? I can signpost on some of them, but definitely push it back.
It's
Who's been the contact for here then?
I can get you the contact. I can be a contact. Eunice can be here today.
Your contact details.
Yeah, I can pass them over and maybe through Stuart as well. So I don't think I have the email addresses. We can definitely get it through, especially for apprentices and things and general training.
And to be honest, anyone that wants any kind of support, the MTC, we have a referral scheme. So if you just want to make it easier to send me basic details of who wants help, where they want help, I just literally email
and it's
the MTC inbox.
Sales. Just click it off.
You have to have visibility in that.
Yes, I'll perhaps circulate around all the areas that the MTC
That's one thing I
support.
wrote down. What is the list
So that would be
free?
things like robotics, service apprentices, free line walks. There's a whole tick box list, and there's a free-form box of I've got this challenge. How can you help me?
And then if you can't, one of the other in the HVMC network might be able to as well, and you can signpost over and say, actually this person, so composites, National Composite Centre is part of the network. Yeah. We don't really do a lot, we might work with them, but we leave them to deal with all of it. We would pass it straight over and say, actually they want to work on some composites, off you go.
Yeah. I guess for you guys it's circular economy and those kind of principles as well, isn't it? How do you keep resources in the value chain and out of landfill? Was one of the biggest things.
Learn more about what you can offer the apprentices, because it could be them that become the champions.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's their future, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Along with the back end of my career, so
yeah.
But it's their future. So if somebody really has a passion for it and wants to get involved, they could become the Techno Group or Techno Set.
Well, you take a lot of apprentices, don't you? So I think there must be somebody there that might want to take that mantle on.
Yeah, and we're an accredited training centre for IEMA as well, so we can do the AIEMA, which is the associate certificate. So that's the lower level, but we also do practitioner level training. So if you've got somebody within the business who wants to become a sustainability practitioner, and then we can go on and mentor them, then just talk to me, because we're an accredited centre for that.
But that could be a route, couldn't it?
Yeah.
I think initially the business leaders, the business holders, the shareholders have got it.
They've got to get this, yeah. Well, we'll share this video, with them, Kevin. Thank you. Thank you very much.